Grüß, willkommen in einem anderen Aufregungsvideo. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 1 of my Star Trek, the original series, Speculation series of videos. In this video I'll be covering the Organians, possibly the oldest known race still hanging around the Star Trek universe. This series of videos will differ from my previous in the different level of speculation required. I'll cover topics of interest where I simply lack sufficient evidence to create a credible and holistic view. So instead I'll take what facts I have and backfill the many gaps with my speculation. I could be totally wrong, but what I come out with will not conflict with the canon of Star Trek, the original series, or the animated series. So you never know, it could very well be correct. In this video, I'm covering the early history of the Organians. Let's start with the information we have about this rather interesting race. Spock discovers that this civilization has remained stagnant for as far back as his tricorder can register, or at least that's what it appears. Spock provides a value of thousands of years, but this could be much greater. When Spock beams down to the Organian planet, he notices the ruins of a large building, a castle in the distance. There are ruined and presumably very old buildings on this planet. This bit of information is puzzling, and we'll come back to it later. During the episode that mentions the Organians are able to project themselves to two rather distant planets, at least 200 light years away from Organia, in opposite direction. That is the Klingon capital and, of course, the human capital. Also in the episode Errant of Mercy, where the Organians are mentioned, the Organians claim no one has died on their planet for uncounted thousands of years, which would imply the Organians are immortal. Uncounted thousands of years would imply more than 1,000, lots of thousand years, or perhaps at least 10 million years. This is obviously a wild guess, but probably represents the lowest likely number of years the Organians have been immortal. We also discover in the episode Errant of Mercy that the Organians seem to be able to feel the emotions of other races and find these emotions disturbing, perhaps only primarily when some sort of violence has occurred, perhaps in the same way that we are disturbed when we see a spider, perhaps. We discover in this episode the Organians were originally humanoid. Likely they looked as they are presenting themselves now. If they could adopt any shape, then they could have looked like the Klingons, but I suspect they stay with a single shape, and most likely, which is the most likely assumption, as this is what they probably looked like in the distant past. They are, at least in the time of this episode, non-corporeal life form. This all occurred millions of years ago, which could align with my guess of 10 million years. That is, when they converted from a corporeal to a non-corporeal life form. The Organians mentioned the planet was created by the Organians as a place visitors could interact with the Organians. Perhaps the Organians like to interact with other species, perhaps in the same way we like to view animals at a zoo. Spock states the Organians are as far above us on the evolutionary scale as we are above the amoeba, which implies they may be originally billions of years old. It's possibly an amoeba could develop into an intelligent species in, let's say, 1 billion years, if everything went right. So while it's likely to be older, that is, they are probably older, 1 billion years seems like the time it took for the Organians to develop from humanoid, that is similar to the Vulcans and humans in the time of the episode, to their non-corporeal state. We also get another quote in the Errant of Mercy episode where Spock indicates the Organians took millions of years to develop into their non-corporeal form. We're guessing this occurred no later than 10 million years ago and possibly longer. Perhaps this took 10 million years, perhaps longer. It's unlikely an amoeba could develop into an intelligent humanoid in only 10 million years. So I strongly suspect that probably the 1 billion time frame is probably the most reasonable. Let's now try and make some sense of all these quotes from the script. The first is to look at the planet Organia. My gut feeling is this may well have been the home planet of the Organians. The ruins on the planet is puzzling, but perhaps the Organians allowed another race to live on this planet, which then built castles which later deteriorate when this other race disappeared. I suspect if the Organians felt discomfort when other races displayed negative emotions, they may well have decided to move the race elsewhere. I suspect the Organians use this planet as some type of zoo, so they can amuse themselves by interacting with corporeal life forms. We can make some guesses on where the planet of Organia resides. This is a top-down view of the galaxy, close to the Federation, Klingon and Romulans' spheres of influence. It resides in between Earth and the Klingon home planet, about 400 light-years away from Earth. This means when the Organians expanded, Earth was reasonably close by. Perhaps they visited Earth and left some evidence behind. However, before we look at that point, let's pin down the timeline. We know that no one had died for about 10 million years. It may have been 3 million or perhaps much more than 10 million years, but let's for the time being assume 10 million years from now. That is, when I say now, from the episode, which is 2264. We're now moving into real guesswork territory now, but the scripts imply it took 10 million years to perhaps 100 million years to evolve into a non-corporeal state. Looking at our amoeba quote, it's likely 100 million years or much, much more. How long does it take for an amoeba to evolve into an intelligent species? In the case of the Organians, this could have been sped up, but for Earth it took about 4 billion years. As a result, I suspect 100 million years is far too short. We are talking about a time frame which must approach 1 billion years. If we assume the Organians became intelligent on Organia 1 billion years ago, they could have spent the following 1 million years to get out into space and then spend several hundred million years exploring. Or several hundred years exploring. I have no idea how long this would have occurred before they started their retreat to their home planet to start their transcending into a non-corporeal state. Sargon's civilization was exploring the galaxy and then 100,000 years later had retreated to a single planet. When they attempted to transcend, which failed in their case, the Organians may have had some form of multi-system political unit 999 million years ago, which may have lasted for several 100,000 years before they withdrew to a single planet. If these wild guesses are correct and the Organians visited Earth 1 billion years ago, what would they find and what traces would they leave behind? They would have found a habitable planet with only simple life forms on it. Likely this was not a good place to colonize, so it's likely the Organians gave our planet a miss, if they were doing a colonization attempt at least. For other planets which may be habitable, after 1 billion years these planets may no longer be habitable. Mars may have been habitable 3 to 4 billion years ago, although 1 billion years ago it was almost certainly dead as well. So some colonized planets would no longer be habitable and would not be colonized by the Federation. That means that the Organians, if they did undertake a colonization program, whatever planets they colonized after 1 billion years may not be good candidates for the Federation or humans or anyone else to colonize. So there may be very little crossover. So, in conclusion, the planets which are still habitable may be only marginally habitable. That is, planets that were habitable during a billion years ago may only be marginally habitable today. In 1 billion years, Earth will only be marginally habitable. So once again, the planets may have been bypassed in the colonization effort of the Federation, and there may very well be no planet where Organia and the Federation co-colonized or co-habitated. For the remaining planets, such as Organia, that may have been kept habitable by the Organians for 1 billion years. So let's put that to one side. Let's look at the other planets that Organia may have colonized. What kind of remains would have resided or been left after 1 billion years? The quick answer is not much. You may find fossil remains, but they would require some effort to conduct the study, which may not be a high priority for a colony world with only 1 million inhabitants, assuming that the Federation colonized the planet which Organia had previously colonized. In summary, one day in the future, some physical remains may be found, but that is a project for the Federation well into the future, perhaps several hundred years from this point, and that only assumes if Federation and Organia colonized the same planet. If they hadn't, then who knows, we may never find any evidence of the prior Organian empire, so to speak. Another interesting question is, did the Organians interact with any other known ancient species? The contenders we have are the providers and the Thasians. As the providers had not yet fully transcended into their non-corporeal form, I suspect the Organians missed them. The Thasians were even later than the providers by an additional few thousand years, so I don't think they would have met them. It's possible the providers were first getting to space when the Organians were meditating on their planet, so there is a very small chance some interaction may have occurred, but it's unlikely. All the other races we are aware of are hundreds of millions of years later, so no overlap could have occurred. If the Organians interacted with any other life form, they're life forms which we have no knowledge of from the original series scripts. The final question is, what did the Organians do when they went out exploring and colonising the galaxy, assuming they did colonise the galaxy? I have no idea of the details. We just don't have enough information. That would represent so much speculation with no evidence to work off. Thus, I'll leave it to those who wish to write stories of that period of the galaxy's evolution and basically consign that to a big black box with a big title saying completely unknown. And so we come to an end of my rather speculative episode 1 of my Star Trek, the original series history speculation series, in this case covering the prehistory of the Star Trek timeline, specifically the Organians. The episode scripts can be found using the URL shown. Alle guten Ding, kommen zu einem Ende.